Hey folks, for today's landscape we're looking at mountains and trees, and let's get started. You can see I got my palette in front of me here, and I did tape down my paper to allow for a really nice clean border, and this is going to help me not have my edges or my paper curl in on me. You don't have to do that. I have really nice clean brushes. Let's get started. First thing I'm going to do is take some water, and I need to wake up my watercolors. So I have my palette in front of me here, and I'm just going to take some water, and I'm starting in the background, which is always a good way to begin when working with watercolor. I'm going to be creating a gradation and kind of a sunset or sunrise, depending on how you want to look at it. But I'm going to start relatively faint. Remember, you can always build your values in your color. And I'm starting with that yellow. As I progress, I'm grabbing some orange, and you'll notice that I'm continuing to dip into the water as I do this. This is going to allow my waters to stay live so I can blend them together if I need to. You want everything to look really well and smooth in the transition. You don't want stripes, so the water is going to help you do that. Keep in mind, however, as you're working with watercolor, the more water you use, the less vibrant your colors are going to be, so be aware of that. On the screen right now, I'm creating some clouds, so I grabbed a little paper towel, crumpled it up, and I'm just dabbing to take away some of that color and hint at clouds. I think I'm going to make it a little bit darker because I want the clouds to show up just a little bit more. So I'm going to go back in and rework my sky just a bit. Notice that I'm letting my colors fade and blend into one another, going back in, and now my cumulus clouds, those fluffy clouds, they show up much cleaner, and I am going to hint at a sun. So I gotta leave some room for that. Great way to do this, easy trick. Take a glue stick, wrap paper towel around it, and you have a sun. Just a slick, quick little trick. Make sure you got the sky how you want it to be. Maybe a couple more clouds, and we're good to go. It does seem a little bit faint still at the moment, but once I add in the contrast with the mountains and trees, that sky will stick out a little bit more. You can wait for this to dry until it's totally dry. I am going to start building in my mountains. Now keep in mind, when you're looking at mountains, you don't want just those triangle peaks. Mountains have ridges and mountain ranges. So build it so it's unique and not perfect little triangles. I'm going to have mine be fainter in the background and get darker the closer it gets to me. So I'm starting off relatively light, and I am using purple. It's not just a pure purple, it's blended in with a little bit of red, so it's tamed down a hair. You'll also notice that it's kind of where they meet. That's where I have my sun, and that's going to be even more prominent. You'll be able to see that more clearly as we progress forward. Once I'm at this point, I did let it dry completely, so or totally dry, and then I'm going to build in my middle ground. So I'm coming forward in space. So I'm going to go a little bit darker here eventually, and before we do that, I'm going to clean up this line. Just make it very, very clear that this indeed is a mountain range. Ah, love that. Alright, I'm going to build forward so we have our next mountain in front of our previous. Not that you can't work on the previous one, you can, but I'm going to continue on here. Once again, not perfect little triangles. And this may be a little bit forward, so maybe it's not just a mountain, maybe it's more hilly. Who knows? We'll see where the painting takes me. Make sure as you bring your mountain down and bring that watercolor down, it fades out a little bit for you so you don't have these harsh lines. You do want it nice and crisp at the top, which is you can see me doing now, but as you fade forward, your life is going to be a lot easier if you're not quite so dark, so you do have that option to add in whatever you want to on the bottom. And I think I'm going to have some potential water. So I'm going to make sure to leave it a little paler. I am getting and mixing a really, really dark bluish purple, so that blue-violet right now, and you'll notice that I grabbed a little bit of green as well. That's going to help darken my color without using a harsh black, which is really, really good because it's not going to be quite so cold. I'm just creating a tree line at the moment, so at the base of those mountains on the previous upper line. And these mountains I'm creating with a small round brush, so a small detail brush, or not mountains, excuse me, trees. And this tree line is very, very simplistic. All you're doing is drawing these straight lines next to one another, and then to create the fir aspects of them on those evergreens, you just kind of shake your pencil a little bit back and forth as you're going down that straight line. These are very, very small, and they're very far away from you, so they're not going to be super high in detail. You don't have to worry about them being crazy detailed because they shouldn't be. You'll notice some of them are fainter than others, and that's okay. That would be the case in actual nature as well. Some things will always be in better detail than others. Having this tree line also shows how large the mountains behind them are, which is a great way to demonstrate space and create depth within your watercolor. Going a little darker here and a little bit larger, so we're in our foreground at the moment. I'm going to go in, and I'll probably end up detailing these a little bit more, but I'm going to plot in where some of my closer trees will be. And you can kind of see on the tree line that I created previously, I let the watercolor bleed down a bit, and that's going to end up being a reflection in water. So I'm going to leave that for a moment as I'm focusing on more of my foreground trees. You'll notice the creation of the trees themselves very similar to what I did before. are like silhouetted trees. So it's not perfect detail. And that's okay. Again, this is not pure black. We have a lot of purple mixed in with it, so it's not quite so cold. You want to make sure you very rarely use that pure black if you can help it. Sometimes people get nervous about doing these big lines, especially if you have a watercolor you're relatively happy about. So it's kind of a confidence in all things situation. But adding these makes a huge difference. And these you want in the best detail possible, but it's very similar to before, just on a larger scale. It's a straight line, and you're creating these horizontal lines back and forth, filling in where the furry part of your tree would be. Awesome. Like hint at some ground here. And as I'm doing this, I of course have water on my paintbrush, but it's not super wet. It's just enough that all my bristles are staying together. So I'm creating very clean lines, but make sure you are not using an excess of water because you don't want anything to bleed on your page. This is coming together nicely. Having little separations where your mountains and your sky peeks through a few of the different furry areas within your trees is very important. It hints at what's behind and gives it some life, because you don't want big black spots everywhere. Not that this is pure black, but still, it does. This one did get very dark, and it's important to still have the life behind it. We're getting very close to being done. I might add a little bitty bird or two in here. And this I'm going to do just pure black, make sure I have a nice clean point. No shakiness to the hand. And very clean. Give him a little teeny body and a friend. And that's it. You have a mountains and trees watercolor landscape.